You already know this feeling even if you've never put words to it. The person who is a little too smart, a little too eager, a little too good, and the quiet, almost involuntary group instinct to take them down a peg. The eye roll at the kid who answers every question, the muttered, "Who does he think he is?" The way a room cools, just slightly toward the person who is a bit too pleased with themselves. That impulse isn't petty, and it isn't modern. It is one of the oldest social instincts our species has, and it was forged in prehistoric groups for a deadly serious reason, because what ancient humans did with their smartest, most ambitious members was one of the most important decisions any group could make. And it was a genuine trap, a bind with no easy way out. Get it wrong in one direction, and a tyrant takes over and the group loses its freedom. Get it wrong in the other direction, and you crush the one mind that could have saved everyone when the hard times came. So how did they handle it? What did ancient humans actually do with the smartest person in the group? And why do you still feel that exact ancient instinct firing in you every single day of your modern life? Let's get into it. Stick with me. First, let's kill the story we all grew up with. The story is that the smartest person in the tribe naturally became the leader. The wise one, the chief. The clever mind that rose to the top because, surely, that is what happens to brilliant people. Cream rises, talent wins, the genius ends up in charge. It is the version in every movie, the grizzled wise elder, the brilliant strategist everyone defers to. And for most of human history, in the kinds of small foraging bands our ancestors lived in for hundreds of thousands of years, it was often the exact opposite. To understand why, you have to understand one strange and crucial fact about these groups. They were very often fiercely, deliberately, almost obsessively equal. Not equal by accident, equal on purpose, mobile hunter-gatherer bands. The way humans lived for the overwhelming majority of our existence frequently had no chiefs, no bosses, no one who could give orders and expect them obeyed. No one person was supposed to rise above the others, and this wasn't because nobody ever wanted to. It was because the group actively constantly worked to prevent it. An anthropologist named Christopher Boehm studied this pattern across a huge range of human societies, and he gave it a name that captures it perfectly: the reverse dominance hierarchy. In most primate groups, the strongest, most dominant individual rises to the top and rules the rest. But in egalitarian human bands, Boehm noticed something flipped. The rest of the group, the majority, actively united to keep any single individual from dominating them. It wasn't the strong controlling the weak, it was the many refusing to be controlled by the one. The whole group became a coalition against anyone who tried to rise too high. And there was a brutally practical reason for this, beyond just a love of fairness. In a small mobile band, there was no surplus, no stored wealth, no walls, no standing guard. Everyone depended directly on everyone else every single day to hunt, to share, to watch the children, to survive. A single domineering individual who started hoarding food, taking mates by force, or bossing people around didn't just offend people, they threatened the cooperation that kept the entire group alive. Equality wasn't a luxury or an ideology, it was survival infrastructure. A band that let a bully take over was a band that would fracture, and a fractured band in the prehistoric world was a dead band. So keeping any one person from rising too high was quite literally a matter of life and death for everyone else. And the smartest, most capable, most ambitious person was exactly the kind of individual most likely to try to rise. Which made them, in the eyes of the group, both the most valuable resource they had and the most dangerous threat they faced at the very same time. So how do you keep a brilliant, ambitious person from taking over when you have no police, no laws, no courts, no written rules? You'd think it would be impossible. It wasn't. Ancient humans had an entire toolkit for it, a set of social technologies so effective. They kept would-be rulers in check for thousands of generations, and the tools start gentle and escalate. The first and most common tool was the one you already recognized at the start of this video: mockery, teasing humor aimed at anyone getting too big for themselves. There is a famous account from an anthropologist named Richard Lee who spent time with the Jew/Hansi people of the Kalahari. He wanted to thank them, so he bought a large, fat ox to share for a feast. And to his bewilderment, instead of being grateful, everyone complained. They mocked the animal. They told him it was a scrawny bag of bones, that there'd be nothing on it but skin, that he'd been cheated. Lee was confused and a little hurt until it was explained to him. This was deliberate. When a hunter in their society brought home a big kill, the group did not heap him with praise. They teased him. They downplayed it. They called the meat worthless. They had a saying that captures the whole philosophy. When a young man kills much meat, he comes to think of himself as a big man, and he thinks of the rest of us as his inferiors. So they cool his heart and make him gentle by insulting the meat. This is sometimes called, in the anthropological literature, insulting the meat, and it is not cruelty. It is one of the most elegant pieces of social engineering humans have ever invented. It lets a great hunter contribute his greatness. The group still eats the ox while preventing that greatness from curdling into arrogance and dominance. You can be brilliant, you just can't be above us. The teasing is how the group says so gently before it has to say it any harder. And there is an even subtler layer to it in some groups, one that is almost unbelievably clever in certain hunter-gatherer societies. The credit for a kill doesn't even go to the person who fired the fatal arrow. It goes to the owner of the arrow, who might be someone else entirely, someone who lent it, or an elder or a weaker hunter who couldn't have made the kill themselves. The whole system is rigged, deliberately, so that no single great hunter can pile up glory and turn it into status. The meat gets shared by rules that scatter the credit across the group. It is as if the society itself is designed from the ground up to make sure that being the best at something never quite lets you rise above everyone else. Skill is welcome. Self-importance is engineered out. This kind of thing, anthropologists call them leveling mechanisms, shows up again and again all over the world in societies that had no contact with each other. The specific customs differ, but the underlying move is always the same: find the person starting to rise and gently, humorously, firmly pull them back level with everyone else. The sheer universality of it tells you how deep and how old this instinct runs. And if gentle teasing didn't work, if the talented, ambitious person kept reaching for more, kept trying to turn their gifts into authority over others, the group escalated, from teasing to open criticism, from criticism to ridicule, from ridicule to shame. A person who became too domineering would find themselves the target of gossip, their reputation quietly eroded, their behavior the subject of pointed stories told around the fire. In a small group where you depend on everyone for survival, social disapproval is a crushing weight. The cold shoulder of 30 people you cannot escape is a powerful thing. It is worth pausing on just how powerful gossip was as a tool here, because we tend to dismiss it as something trivial or mean. In a band with no written records and no formal law, talk was the law, reputation was everything, and gossip was the constant invisible court in which reputations were made and unmade. A would-be tyrant couldn't fight gossip the way he might fight a rival. He couldn't punch a rumor, couldn't outmuscle a whispered consensus that he was becoming a problem. Gossip let the whole group quietly coordinate against an overbearing individual without any single person having to confront him directly and dangerously. By the time the talk had done its work, everyone already agreed, and the arrogant individual found the entire social world subtly turned against him. It is one of the oldest and most effective weapons the many have ever held against the one, and beyond that lay heavier sanctions still. A person who would not be humbled could be deliberately ignored, frozen out of cooperation, their words met with silence. They could be abandoned, the group simply moving on without them, which in the ancient world was extraordinarily dangerous for the one left behind. And in the most extreme cases for the truly incorrigible, the bully who would not stop, the would-be tyrant who threatened the safety of everyone. The ethnographic record contains accounts of groups taking the ultimate, collective step to remove a dangerous individual permanently. It was rare, it was a last resort, but the possibility was real, and everyone knew it. The message running underneath the whole system was unmistakable. No one, no matter how gifted, gets to rule the rest of us. Now, if I stopped here, you'd have a grim picture. You'd think ancient humans simply hated their best and brightest and beat them down. But that is only half the story, and the other half is just as important, because if the group only crushed talent, it would have died out. A band that punished every clever idea, that drove away every innovator, would lose every competition with the band next door that knew how to use its geniuses. So they had to thread an incredibly fine needle and make no mistake about how much those exceptional minds mattered. Almost everything that let humans survive in a hostile world started as a bright idea in a single head. Someone somewhere was the first to figure out how to haft a sharp stone onto a wooden shaft and make a real spear. Someone was the first to work out that you could follow vultures to a fresh carcass, or read the sky to predict the rain, or find water by digging in a dry riverbed. Someone who remembered, across 40 years, the location of the spring that only mattered once a generation. In the worst drought, when it saved everyone. In a world with no books and no internet, the exceptional individual was the group's research lab, its library, and its emergency hotline, all at once. When the normal way of doing things failed, when the herds didn't come, when the familiar foods ran out, when disaster struck, survival often came down to whether the group had a mind sharp enough to invent a new answer fast. Those minds were precious, almost beyond measure. A group that wasted them was gambling with its own existence. So the ancient bind was real and it was sharp. You cannot afford to lose your geniuses, and you cannot afford to let them rule you. Here is how our ancestors solved it. Here is how they did it. The trick, and it is a beautiful one, was to separate two things we usually lump together: influence and dominance. Ancient groups were perfectly happy to be influenced by their smartest members. They listened to them. The person who knew the most about the herds was heated when it came time to hunt. The one who remembered the route to water in the last great drought was followed when the rivers dried. The brilliant toolmaker was copied. The wise elder who had seen the most was sought out for counsel, and their advice carried real weight. Exceptional individuals earned enormous respect, and their ideas genuinely shaped what the group did. What they were not allowed to do was convert that respect into power. They could lead by example, by skill, by wisdom, leadership that others followed freely because it was good. What they could not do was command. They could not give orders. They could not take more than their share, boss people around, or demand obedience. The moment a respected person tried to turn their influence into authority over others, the leveling machinery, the teasing, the shaming, all of it, came roaring back to life, and the gifted individuals themselves often learned to perform their own humility, precisely to stay safe and stay welcome. A skilled hunter in many of these societies would be the first to downplay his own kill. He'd come back to camp and say it was a tiny, pathetic animal, hardly worth the walk, knowing full well it was a fat prize. This self-deprecation wasn't false modesty for its own sake. It was a survival skill. By insulting his own meat before anyone else could, by refusing to claim the glory he'd earned, he signaled to everyone, "I'm still one of you. I'm not rising above you. You have nothing to fear from me." The smartest individuals weren't just controlled by the group's humility customs. They internalized them. They became masters of wearing their gifts lightly, of being brilliant without ever seeming to claim it. In a sense, the highest social art in these societies was being exceptional and acting ordinary at the very same time. So the genius was used and honored, but on the group's terms, not their own. Their brilliance flowed into the community as a gift, not a throne. A great hunter fed everyone but ruled no one. A wise mind guided the group but could not govern it. The exceptional person got something real in return: respect, gratitude, a kind of quiet status, but never the one thing that would have let them dominate: the power to make others obey. And here is the part nobody tells you, the part that I think is genuinely profound. This wasn't just a system imposed from outside, with the group on one side and the reluctant genius on the other. Over countless generations, it sank inward. It became part of human nature itself. It shaped how we feel from the inside. Think about it. If for hundreds of thousands of years, the people who showed off, who grabbed for dominance, who lorded their gifts over others, were mocked, shamed, abandoned, or worse, and the people who were brilliant but humble, who shared their gifts without demanding a throne, were respected and kept safe, then evolution and culture together were quietly selecting generation after generation for a very particular kind of mind. A mind that is gifted, yes, but also deeply attuned to how its gifts are landing on others. A mind that feels the pull of ambition but also feels the danger in it. This is why genuine modesty is so universally admired and arrogance so universally disliked in every human culture on Earth. It is why we instinctively love the brilliant person who is humble about it and instinctively recoil from the one who won't stop reminding us how brilliant they are. It is why down to earth is a compliment everywhere. We are running the ancient program. A leveling instinct didn't just live out there in the group's response. It moved inside and became a voice in your own head, the one that tells you not to brag, not to get too big, to play down your wins, to be one of the group. That voice is tens of thousands of years old. So let's go back to that feeling we started with. The eye roll at the person who is a little too pleased with themselves. The instinct to take the show off down a peg. Now you know what it is. It is not pettiness. It is the ancient immune system of the human group still active in you. The same instinct that kept tyrants from rising in 1,000 prehistoric bands. The same instinct that protected the freedom and equality of your ancestors for longer than civilization has even existed. When you feel that flicker of irritation at someone's arrogance, you are feeling the echo of one of the most important social inventions our species ever made, the refusal to be ruled. But here is the other half, and don't lose it. That same heritage is why you light up at the humble genius, the brilliant person who lifts others instead of standing on them, the one who has every reason to boast and simply doesn't. We are drawn to that person on a level deeper than reason, because for our entire history as a species, that person was the perfect resolution to the ancient bind, all of the gift, none of the threat, the mind that could save the group, wrapped in the humility that made it safe to keep around. So what did ancient humans do with the smartest person in the group? They did something extraordinary, something no other species does. They found a way to drink from that mind without being ruled by it. They kept their geniuses close, listened to them, learned from them, followed their wisdom when it mattered most, and never ever let them become kings. They built a culture that could hold brilliance and equality in the same hand, and in doing so, they wired into all of us, right down to the gut, both a fierce love of fairness and a deep, lasting suspicion of anyone who reaches for too much. That bind never went away. You live inside it still in your workplace, your school, your friendships, every time you feel the pull between wanting to shine and not wanting to seem like you're rising above everyone else. That tension isn't a flaw in you. It is an inheritance. It is the oldest answer our species ever found to one of the oldest questions there is. What do we do with the one among us who is simply more? So here is my question for you, and I really do want to know. Think of the most brilliant person you've ever known. Were they loved or were they resented? And which one were they? The one who reached for a throne or the one who shared the gift and stayed one of us? Tell me about them in the comments. I read them, and your stories about this are always the best part. Until then, take care of yourselves and of each other, and I'll see you soon.